So, all right, we're going to continue on our little journey. Chosen for greatness, right? So this is out of Kelly Varner's book. He's got this. I think I ended with this last week, so I'll start with it this week. He says, our time of fulfilling his will has come, right? The time is now, right? It's not tomorrow, or not 2 weeks from today. It's right now. Today is the day, right? That's what he's saying, right? We've got to stop putting things off for tomorrow, right? I am the biggest procrastinator in the world, but I feel like I am because I work better under pressure. So, why, he's a big procrastinator? Brother Danny?
I'm not saying anything.
Oh, okay. We'll save that for another day. But yes, right, our time is now, right? We are entering the land of more than enough. God has given us more than enough. So we're going to jump into 2 Corinthians 9 and 8. It said, and God is able. I'm just going to stop right there. And God is able. We've got to really believe that. God is able.
Full assurance, God is able.
Able. He is able. More than able. Right? And God is able to make all grace, right? Not just some grace, all grace. Every favor and earthly blessing come in abundance to you, so that you may always, I love the Amplified, it says, under all circumstances, right? It's not just some circumstances, all circumstances, regardless of the need, have complete sufficiency in everything, being completely self-sufficient in him, and have an abundance for every good work and act of charity. So he has given us more than enough. Right? We talked about it a few weeks ago. We're more than conquerors. Right? So he doesn't just give you enough. He gives you more than you need. Right? When you're given more than you need, it kind of erases the excuses. Because, the excuse will happen, well, I didn't have enough. Well, he's given you more. Right? So Pastor he started talking about Joshua 3 last week, and I was like, oh man, he's going to get into the next scripture that Kelly Varner has in the book. And I'm like, I don't want to repeat what he said, right? But I'm just going to go there, but I'm going to head a little different direction here. So Kelly Varner has Joshua 3, verse 1. It says, Joshua got up early in the morning, right? It's time to wake up. We need to stop sleeping, right? You've got to wake up. It's time for the church to wake up. And it says, then he and all the children of Israel set out from Shittim and came to the Jordan, and they spent the night there before they crossed the river. Right? God told the people of Israel to wait 3 days at the shore of the Jordan. So let's talk about, and I'm like, all right, I looked into Shittim a little bit, right? Let's talk about Shittim for a few. So it's a large area in the plains of Moab, directly across from Jericho, immediately east of the Jordan and north of the Dead Sea. Right? So Shittim is significant in Israel's history because it's the last, it's the site of the last encampment of the nation at the end of their wilderness, right? Before they crossed the Jordan into the promised land. Right? So a lot of us are in that place sometimes, that last place where you have to make a decision. Right? You're going through something. Are you going to trust God to take you through it? Right? And a lot happened in Shittim before the Israelites did cross over. And that happens to us. When we're in that place of decisions, a lot happens. Because a lot of decisions have to be made. A lot of things are coming at you left and right to distract you from what your purpose is, from what you're supposed to do. So just a couple things that happened, right? The episode involving Balaam and his donkey occurred. King Balak of Moab hired Balaam, a pagan seer, to curse the people of God and prevent them from entering Canaan. Instead, Balaam ended up blessing the nation of Israel. What else? In Shittim, the Israelites were enticed into idolatrous Baal worship and immoral sexual relations with Moab and the Midianite women. Angered by their unfaithfulness, the Lord sent a plague on the men of Israel, killing 24,000 of them. So there's a lot of bad things happening in this place, right? But there's a point though. At Shittim, in preparation for entering Canaan, a tribe-by-tribe census was taken of all the men ready for battle. It was here the Israelites defeated the Midianites from their headquarters at Shittim. Right? In Shittim, Moses delivered his farewell speech and final blessings to the people. And at Shittim, Joshua was declared Moses' successor. And then the journey crossing through the Jordan River with the Ark of the Covenant began in Shittim and ended in Gilgal. And in Micah it says, "My people, remember your journey from Shittim to Gilgal, that you may know the righteous acts of the Lord." Right? So do not forget what the Lord has done. Amen. That is key. Amen. Right? Because that will get you through your next Jordan. Right? That will get you to cross over that obstacle in your way from getting into the promised land. Right? The promised land, yes, was a place, but it's also a reality. Right? It's a spiritual reality. You've got to overcome something to move higher in God. Because there's something always keeping you from doing that. Right? There's always a Jordan that is overflowing, that looks way too big for you to get through in your way from moving up higher in God. There's just something there to distract you that say you're not good enough. Right? Or God didn't choose you to come up higher, which he did. Right? So I'm going to say that again. Do not forget what the Lord has done, because that is the only thing that will help encourage you to get through your current situation. Right? Because what did they do? They built a monument after they crossed over. Why? As a remembrance of what the Lord did. Right? Because when the next thing comes, you can look back and say, well, God, you were able back then, and you're more than able today. Right?
It's the enemy's plan to plant doubt in your mind.
Yep.
Always.
So Gilgal was a place of consecration and change. It was at Gilgal that the Israelites were circumcised and celebrated their first Passover in the Promised Land. Right? So when you get through your Jordan, right, change has to come. Something needs to be changed because God just took you through something, so there's got to be some sort of growth that happens in your life, right? Some sort of maturity. Let's see. So it was at Gilgal that the Israelites were circumcised and celebrated their first Passover in the Promised Land. The children of those who had wandered in the desert had not yet been circumcised, and it was time for them to take the sign of the covenant and be set apart as God's people. Right? Set apart. We've got to be set apart. Let's see. This time of circumcision is what gave Gilgal its name. For the Lord said he had rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. Right? The reproach was what? The reproach was the Israelites' uncircumcised condition. Right? The rolling away of the reproach set them apart once and for all from the Egyptian people in the way of life. So think about that. The stone was rolled away. Right? Jesus rose from the dead. The stone was rolled away. That set him apart from anybody else that was on this earth. Amen. And that's what he does to us. Right? When he helps us overcome, when he helps you cross your Jordan. But you've got to trust God for that, for in order for that to happen, right? It's all about trusting the Lord and actually believing it. Easier said than done, right? And this is what's key. God called Israel to a place where they saw themselves as they were in him. Right? God called Israel to a place where they saw themselves as they were in him. Not as they were in themselves, as they were in him. Big difference. And he does the same thing today. He's calling us to a place where we can see ourselves as we are in him. So by faith, they could see themselves as an obedient, trusting people and stop seeing themselves as they were in their slavery and bondage, right? Because that is what hinders us sometimes. We see ourselves as who we used to be versus who we are in him. And that's our problem right here. My mind tells me who I used to be all the time versus who I am today in him. And that's what holds me back. So back to the word shittim. It is a transliteration of the Hebrew word for, how do I say it? Acacia tree? Acacia, right? Acacia trees, okay. I even had this stupid thing do the pronunciation because I couldn't figure it out, and I forgot. You ever do that? Google translation? Yep. Okay, good. It's not just me. Yeah, so the shittim is it's a transliteration of the Hebrew word for acacia trees. The location was likely named for its great number of acacias, because that's the thing that grew out there. Let's see. An alternate name for this area is Abel, Shittim, which means meadow for stream of the acacias. The valley of Shittim, or valley of acacias, mentioned in a prophetic vision in the book of Joel, is a region that receives water from a spring in the temple. Right, and this is out of the book of Joel right here. And in that day the mountains shall drip sweet wine, and the hills shall flow with milk, and all the stream beds of Judah shall flow with water, and a fountain shall come forth from the house of the Lord, and the water, the valley of Shittim. Right, so that's where the life comes from, the temple. So a couple interesting facts about, yeah, right, that's where the life comes from. Yep. A couple interesting facts about acacia. In the Old Covenant, God commands Moses and the children of Israel to make basically everything for the tabernacle and the ark of the covenant from acacia wood. Some items were overlaid with pure gold, but everything except the golden lampstand had acacia wood at the core. So why acacia? Why this wood, right? Right, it's the only tree that grew in the desert in abundance and was more bush-like than tree-like. Acacia wood is dense, thorny. The grain of the wood is gnarly and changes direction. So think about it. Yeah. Stop. That's where I'm getting at. That's us. Jeez. You want to come up here? Where's the mic? But it's so true, right? Acacia wood is dense. We're dense. Or I'm sorry, I'm dense sometimes, right? I don't know if you guys are. I can be thorny sometimes, right? I can be gnarly and not in a good way. Right, exactly. And we're always headed in different directions. Right? It's also resistant to decay and happens to be unpalatable to insects, making an ideal material for building items that would need to be durable and lasting, such as the tabernacle that was mobile and constantly being moved. The construction process was tricky as the wood could shatter if the tools used by the craftsmen were not kept sharp. So think about that, right? So like I just said, we can be like acacia wood, gnarly, our grain changing direction, thorny, and not easy to work with, right? But, here's the but, God loves to take the gnarly things and cover them with gold. And you've got to really believe that. Right? The Lord is not going to keep you in the desert if you seek after him. Right? What is he looking for? He's looking for, yes, God. That's all he's looking for. Yes, God. He's looking for obedience from his people. Right? Because what kept them in the wilderness for so long was their disobedience. So we know this, right? We just said it. We are God's dwelling place, right? If he was so concerned and so caring about his first dwelling place, why do we think he's not concerned about his dwelling place now? Right? Think about that. He went into full detail on how he wanted the first place he dwelt in to be. Why would he change? Nothing's changed. He's still concerned for each and every one of us. Right? Why? Because he's chosen us for something greater, right? Let's see. Israel settled in Shittim, and the people began to commit harlotry with the daughters of Moab. They invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and prostrated themselves to their gods. The area known as Shittim was so named because of the abundance of acacia, but it was a place of idol worship and lowliness of morality, which dragged the children of Israel down. Let's see. I actually read there is a spring from Shittim that watered Sodom. So that's how bad this place was. But why these specific trees from this specific unholy location to create the ark and the tabernacle? Like why? Why did God choose that, right? And I read this somewhere and I thought it was great. God always prepares the remedy before the illness. He prepares the remedy before the illness. Right? So the use of acacia was in fact the cure for the moral failures of the people in Shittim. There's a picture. So just like the children of Israel, right? We sometimes have a tendency to lose our way when we begin to feel unworthy and impure. But we've got to really believe we are worthy and we are pure because he chose us, right? Right? Because he chose that brush for a purpose. When anybody else walking by that brush would have been like, look at this thing. It's all gnarly. It's got thorns coming out of it. It's useless. And that's how we sometimes think of ourselves, as useless, but we have a purpose. We're not useless. God chose each and every one of us for something. Yes, need the mic. Hold on.
And what God's trying to get us to do is change our mentality. Because if we always have that mindset, we're never going to go on to the fullness of what Christ has called us to. We'll keep going around the mountain and around the mountain, having the same mindsets and the same thoughts that we've always had. And God says it's time to put it away. I believe he's talking to this church. It's time we move. It's exactly what you said. It's time to wake up.
Yep.
Everything around us is waking up to whatever, whether it be good or bad. We're still going around the mountain thinking like we think. No, if God has called us for a purpose, we need to get on board and begin to move. And I'm speaking to myself.
Yeah, no, it's true. Well, not true that you're speaking to yourself, but we all should be speaking to ourselves like that. But it's so true because we come up to that river. That river is like overflowing, and God is like, I'm able to get you through that river. And we're like, no, not today. And we come back to living in Shittim because we like Shittim for some reason versus moving on into the promised land and into the promised reality is what I'm talking about, right? Because that reality brings what? We're a people that are tired. We're all looking for what? God's peace and rest to dwell amongst us, right? That's the promised land, isn't it? Because in the natural, it's a picture of an amazing place, but in the spirit, it's a place of rest for God's people. It's a place to dwell. But this, like God doing this in the place he did was a constant reminder of God's habitation in their midst, right? By using that acacia wood, that was his reminder that he was there. The ark being built of these same trees was meant to reinforce the understanding that moral failure was not a function of trees or springs of water, but a matter of choice. That's the key, right? Our failure is because of our choice. right? When I fall short, it's because of the choices that I made. Because God gives us the choice, right? Does he not? He doesn't force us to do anything. He doesn't force you to cross that river. He gives you the choice. Are you going to trust me or are you not? Right? Oh, I'm sorry. Are you going to follow me? Right? Because that's how they got through. They followed God. But it's a choice.
Brother Ed?
Yep.
Without showing of raise of hands, how many of us have said, God, just tell me what to do? But then our humanistic reasoning is, how many times have we not liked being told what to do? Think about that for a second. As a parent, how many times, I hate when somebody tells me what to do.
We don't like that.
We ask God what to do, and then, humanistic nature, we don't like to be told what to do. Why? I want to make my own choice. And then we cry when it doesn't work out, saying, God, why'd you let me choose that way?
Yep, that's true.
He gave us what we
Because we
wanted.
blame him.
It's easy to blame God.
Yep. Very easy to blame God.
Very easy.
Or to blame somebody else.
People.
Yep.
Come on. Oh, that's so true.
Oh, I thought you were going to kick me off. Thought I said something wrong. I was going to get tackled.
Oh, God.
Right, but we have that choice, and we have to believe that he has chosen us for greatness, for something better. We've got to just believe that. There is something greater. You just can't be happy with the current situation that you're in. You can't be happy with living in Shittim. You've got to press on and move on and cross the Jordan and get into that promised reality, right? So God's plan to use of the same wood would be a spiritual healing of the sins of the people at Shittim. Think about that. Like we just talked about, he is still using the same thing to carry his presence today, but it looks a little different than he did back then. The same exact thing. Same concept at least, right? The same, exactly. But we've got to really believe that, right? So let's get back into Joshua 3 after that rabbit trail. It took 30 minutes.
That's all right.
So all that time the people of Israel saw a rushing river swollen with spring rains lie in front of them. They must have asked, how can we ever cross this river? Right? Crossing the Jordan is a turning point on the way to freedom. The waters of the Jordan represent freedom from what? Oppression, breakthrough, and deliverance. Let's see. So in Deuteronomy 30:18, it says the Israelites were reaching the last leg of their journey through the wilderness, right? Like you're like, oh yeah, we're almost there, right? We've dealt with this for 40 years. We're almost where we need to be. And all of a sudden you come to this river and you're like, oh, really? You know, they endured hunger, loss during what seemed to be a never-ending journey, right? Sometimes we can get caught up in a season that seems never-ending, right? Sometimes? Okay, I'm sorry. A lot of times, most of the time, we can get caught up in a season that seems never-ending, right? But we've got to realize seasons were meant to change. But it takes that choice to change the season you're in.
Every plane starts on the ground. Listen to this. Every plane starts on the ground. There's no plane that's ever going to get to the altitude of cruising until it leaves the ground. It's like a shifter in a car. Neutral, you're going nowhere. First gear, you're going somewhere. First gear is still forward, but you can't get from first gear to fourth gear. We want first to fifth.
Oh,
we
yeah.
want to go straight to our destination and where we're going. But you have to do it in the process of what God is doing and saying. We can't go all the way to the end without going through the process first. And it's the process that trips us up every time. I would not have picked my path. I don't think any one of you guys would have picked your path. But in hindsight, how many of us can say, oh, I see why God did that now?
Right. And when you're in fifth gear, you're usually cruising along. Everything is great. First, second, third, and fourth, there's a little resistance happening, just like the plane, right? It takes work to get to that altitude, to get to cruising, which we all like, right? When you fly in a plane, I love when we hit cruising because you're not going up no more. There's, the odds of you crashing are a little less, I think, right? It just feels safer when you're at that cruising altitude, right? We hate the part. Yeah, there could be turbulence on the way, but getting there is the hard part, right? Your stomach goes up. You're praying the whole time, like, God, don't take me down, et cetera, et cetera.
There's actually less fuel used and consumed during the cruising process.
True, yeah.
There's more in the process
Of getting there,
where
yeah.
you're going. Then once you level off, there's less friction.
Yep, friction. We don't like friction.
We don't.
No, friction hurts.
Friction burns.
It hurts, yep. Yep.
Just a quick statement here. We can learn a big lesson from airplanes, right? Let God go through your baggage before you get on a plane.
Right, yeah. Right, we've shared this before. He doesn't like extra baggage. There's a fee. Yeah. Yep. Yep, he doesn't like your extra baggage. See.
Let's find an acronym for TSA.
You've got us in vacation mode now. Why don't we go fly somewhere?
There you go. Let's go with that.
Yeah, so seasons are meant to change. But in this moment, it was coming to a conclusion. Then the Lord instructed them to choose a good path. I'm just going to jump into Deuteronomy real quick, starting 15. I think, right? Yeah. So it says, listen closely, right? It's getting your attention. Listen up. I got something important to say. I've set before you today life and prosperity, good, and death and adversity, evil. Right? So there's a choice. Which one are you going to choose? Right? I have set before you today life and prosperity, and death and adversity. Right? That's a choice. Which one are you going to choose? Under the old covenant, Israel had a choice, right? They could choose life or death, good or evil. It was up to them. God was going to glorify himself through Israel one way or another, and he's going to do the same with us. He's going to glorify himself through us one way or another. Which road are we going to take, though? Which choice are we going to make? Right? How it's really going to happen is our choice. He lets you choose. Verse 16, in that I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk, that is, to live each and every day in his ways, and to keep his commandments and his statutes and his judgments, precepts, so that you will live and multiply, and that the Lord your God will bless you in the land which you are entering to possess. Right? We don't relate to God on the terms of the old covenant. We know that, right? We relate to God on terms of the better covenant, right? In Jesus. Right? Our relationship with God isn't based on what I do for God, but it's based on what Jesus has done on my behalf. Verse 17, but if your heart turns away and you will not hear and obey, but are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you will certainly perish. You will not live long in the land which you cross the Jordan to enter and possess. So there's always going to be a choice, even when you cross that Jordan. Once you cross it, it ain't over. You've got to continue to make that choice. God, is it you today or is it not you today? Right? Because you'll get kicked out. Or you'll kick yourself out. I'm sorry. Verse 19, I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you today, that I have set before you life and death, the blessings and the curse. Therefore, you shall choose life in order that you may live, you and your descendants. Right? And God definitely cares about what you choose, because he wants you to choose life. Right? He wants you to enter the promised land, and he wants you to stay there. He wants you to be in that place of rest. Let's see, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip over some stuff. But yeah, he has chosen us to have a life, and more abundant life, but we need to respond. Right? He just doesn't say, hey, I'm going to give you life and abundant life. No, he does, but then he wants you to respond to it and say, yes, God, I'm going to obey you. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to do what you say. Let's see. Jesus said, he who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me scatters. That's Luke 11:23. And then Jesus is still asking this question, right? And this question, it just really resonates, because I heard it a little while. I mean, I've heard it for a while, but it was brought up recently. But it really says, who do you say that I am? Right? Because there's the choice. You've got a choice. Who do you say that he is? That's a daily question when you wake up. Who do you say that he is every day? That's a choice he gives us. And the reality is there is, if you really think about it, and it's a tough one, right? But the answer to that question really does determine your destiny. Right? Because if you choose him, what are you going to have? You're going to have life and abundant life. But if you don't choose him, what are you going to have? I'm not going to say the D word, but death is going to come. Right? Death and destruction. So verse 20, by loving the Lord your God, by obeying his voice, and by holding closely to him, for he is your life. Right? The Amplified says, he is your good life. For he is your life, for he is your life, your good life, your abundant life, your fulfillment, and the length of your days. So if he is dwelling in you and working through you, your days are going to be long. And not in a bad way. I know we're like, oh, yesterday was such a long day. That's not what I mean. That you may live in the land which the Lord promised you to give to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Right? So to love God is to obey his voice. Obey. Obedience. The O word that we hate. Obedience hurts because you're going to do something that you probably don't want to do. All right, so back to Joshua. Sorry, I'm all over the place today. Verse 2. And it happened at the end of 3 days that the officers went throughout the camp. And we just talked about this. God commanded them to wait for 3 days while the river is at flood stage. The whole time they must have been asking themselves, how the heck are we going to cross this thing? Right? Because has God ever told you to do something, and then there was waiting involved, and then you were like, how is this going to happen? Because in the waiting, what starts to happen? The thinking starts to happen. The doubts start to trickle in. I can't do this starts to dwell in here. Like think about that. Put yourself in their shoes. God says, go to this river, wait there, and I'm gonna take you through it. And you're standing there for 3 days, and you're like, holy smokes, how is this gonna happen? We can't think that way. Next time there's a lot of rain, go to a river, stand on the banks for 3 days. And think about how these guys, or what they were thinking about how they were going to get through that river. Right, we turn around in 30 seconds and run the other way. I know I would. right? God asks us to wait before he moves. Because there's usually what happening in the waiting. There's preparation happening. Let's see. Oh yeah, and by the way, all this is happening while there's millions of people waiting also with you. And what usually happens when you're with a group of people in a bad situation? There's even more grumbling, more moaning, more complaining happening, more doubt. There's more people fueling the doubt. Hey, here's some more fire for your doubt. Let's make it grow.
Oh, that is so true. Get away.
Get away.
Get away.
Yeah. But you just got to think about what that really could have looked like. So verse 3, and they commanded the people, when you seek the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from where you are and follow it. So think about this. Joshua didn't, so what do we do in the natural, right? When there's something, a flood happening or something bad, right? We've got what? The Army Corps of Engineers to figure out how to fix the problem. Well, Joshua didn't have that back then, right? He didn't have those people there to figure out how to get across the river. But it didn't matter because he knew that it was a spiritual condition. It was a spiritual problem. And that's why he sent the priests who carried the ark first. Right? He sent God ahead, like we talked about last week, how Pastor talked about. Sent God first to make the way. Let's see. The next verse deals with how far they should stay away from the ark, right? And one reason was because of the holy nature of the ark. And the other was God wanted all to see that it was him who made the way, right? Because if they all would have crowded around this thing, people wouldn't have seen, because you ever go to a crowd and once everybody starts crowding around the center object of attention, you can't really see what's happening. But if you're standing far back and there's some gaps, you can actually see what's happening. So God wanted those people to see that it was him that made the way, right? Because the people in the back really couldn't see it, and by the time they got across, they probably would have heard something different. So God wanted to show them that it was him that made the way for them to cross the river. But the only way that they were able to do this impossible task, right, was how? Set your eyes on the presence of God. And just follow him. That's it. Simple, right? Right? We're all going through stuff. You want to know how to get through it? Set your eyes on the presence of God. And put him first. Right? And he'll get you through. Verse 4, talks about the distance. However, there shall be a distance between you and it of about 2,000 cubits, so 3,000 feet-ish by measurement. Do not come near it, so that you may be able to see the ark and know the way you are to go, for you have not passed this way before. Because if you can't see the ark, you're not going to know the way to go, because man is going to tell you which way you should go. Because if you can't see it, you're going to trust in man to give you direction. And trusting in man for direction always isn't the right thing to do. You can't even trust Siri to give you the right directions. And Siri is man-made, right? Right. Yes, sir.
If you think about the layout, of the land, it was a valley point in the river, and at flood stage, it's probably 100 feet wide, 10 feet deep. But if you've ever seen something at flood stage, the water's spread out. But it's also a lower point in the river, and so God literally gave the Israelites a bird's eye view of what was going on, because at 2,000 to 3,000 feet away from the ark, they had a really good view of what was going on. And then they really did have to trust because they also had a good view of just how wide the river was at that point.
Yep, true.
Here's a good example. Brother Ed's a very tall guy. Stand forward. If I was trying to see something in front of him, I can't see nothing but past his shoulders. God's call to us is come up higher. A different perspective. Now I can see clearly over the other side. I can't see what's going on in front of me when that situation's right in front of me. But the second we step back from where we are and step up, that's why stadiums are built in different levels. You'll always see those chairs going higher and higher. They're called stadium seating. God's got stadium seating in our lives that if we would just step up a little bit higher, we would see something a little bit differently.
Yep. So I'm just going to finish this verse. So, do not come near it, so that you may be able to see the ark and know the way you are to go. And here's the important part. For you have not passed this way before. Has anybody passed this way before? Today. Has anybody gone this way yet? We haven't, right? This is something different than yesterday, right? But the key is what? Follow him, and he's going to get through it. He's going to bring you through. Because we don't know today. Today is different than yesterday, right? When COVID hit, everybody was like, oh, we've never dealt with this before. Obviously, we haven't. But every day is the same thing. So we're going to stop there. Amen.